So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a home seller seminar, and we are so happy to have you. We have a great panel with us this evening, some familiar faces, some faces we haven't had the opportunity to have with us. So we're really happy to have this great group of people with us. To start, we'll introduce ourselves, I guess.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Geoff.
And we are the Aaron and Geoff team at Compass, your Bronx residential real estate experts.
And we are really happy to be bringing together a really intelligent group of people who know this business well. We'll start with our guest who hasn't been here yet on our little kind of seminars. Roy Fenichel is here. Roy, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Geoff, for inviting us all on today. Jay Melora, good to be with you. I am Roy Fenichel, attorney with Newmark Title. From the Bronx to California and everywhere in between, we can issue title, and it's our job to make sure everything closes smoothly and buyer is protected and seller has efficiency. And that's our job.
And Jay is here again with us. Jay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you both again for having me and this illustrious panel. I always appreciate being here with you guys. I am the managing member of Zimner Law PC. We're a boutique law firm representing primarily residential real estate transactions, sell side, buy side, co-ops, condos, single family, multifamily, in and around New York City. Thanks in large part to the two of you who have put your faith and trust in me to help you get from contract to closing. And that's me.
And last but certainly not least, the wonderful Melora Love.
Melora Love!
That's it, Melora Love! Hey, everybody. My name is Melora Love. I am a senior loan originator with Cross Country Mortgage. I'm privileged to be part of the Aaron and Geoff, Roy, Jay team. We've worked together over many years. It's been a lot of fun. And each person plays such an integral part in the entire real estate process. I counted it one time, guys and ladies and gentlemen out of the audience, it takes about 31 people to process a mortgage from beginning to end. And these four on the screen, including me, I guess makes 5, are just the integral part to the process. So I've been doing this for 25 years. I've lived to tell through many economic situations, and it's great to be here. At the end of the day, I can speak for all of us because I know the hearts of everyone on this call. We're your teammates from beginning to end, and it's a privilege to be here to just give you our insights on what's happening in the market.
You know, it's May 7th, so we are halfway through the second quarter. And before we get into the specifics of selling a home, you know, most sellers are also buyers. And I'm wondering, Melora, if you can give us a sense of where the market has been as far as rates, because that's always the first question people have, especially with the way the headlines have been. Where are rates today?
Well, that's a great question. You know, it's like you never know where they're going to be on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people in the buying market and the selling market, because sellers are going to want to buy and may need a mortgage to bridge the gap between buying and selling, or just would like to have a mortgage, because I always say people enjoy borrowing other people's money versus their own and letting their money work for them and borrow someone else's money. So it's been a very interesting twist and turn, everybody. So the market started off great in January, February, and March. Everything was looking great. Inflation was going down. Rates were following suit. Everything was going down. Around March, we were locking in 30-year money around 6.625. That was down from 8. Everybody was high-fiving each other, giving each other bear hugs and kisses, saying, it's over, rates are coming down, bring on the real estate market. Well, suddenly Powell starts talking again. And the minute he opens his mouth, the market will shift on us on a dime. So suddenly he's now saying he's not going to lower the prime interest rate for lending like he had said he was going to do, that he didn't feel that the economy was where it should be to justify that. So to give you perspective, in the last 30 days, the 10-year treasury yield, which is what mortgages are based on, is yield, not the rate, and not the prime lending rate, which is what automobile loans, car loans, home equity lines of credit, student loans are based on, has remained relatively flat since he spoke. It started off at the beginning of, just kind of give you some indication, the beginning of April, it was at 4.31, the 10-year treasury yield. Here we are on May 7th, is at 4.36. So they're up a little bit. Flat rates are about, they've gone from 6.625 since March to roughly around 30-year money is in the low 7%, I would say. So again, historically low. The average rate, if you Google it, is just around 8% now, thanks to the last 2 years of rates being really low. We're still below the national average. Rates should not keep you from living your dream, because you can always refinance, buy the home, be where you're happy, live where you're happy, sell your home while it's a seller's market, make tons of money, buy the home to where you can be happy. Rates are always temporary, everyone. They're always changing. And that's my spiel on rates, everybody.
I love it. And one thing I love about where you are now is you have all of these different products that no matter what the situation, you have something that may work. And there are all different kinds of levers we can pull to help make it more affordable for a lot of buyers, right?
That's right, because I'm at Cross Country Mortgage. We're what's known as a correspondent lender. So that means we have our own product line, which is just like all the other banks' product lines. Those are for very good standard pay stub people, W-2 people. We have our own set of no income verification, but it's now called no ratio loans for people who are self-employed, where you take advantage of what the IRS will allow, a lot of tax deductions, so you don't show a lot of income. But those are our own loans. We don't broker them out, so we can make exceptions to our own policy. We have about 5 different varieties of those type. And then we have about another, let's call it 150,000 other vendors, where if our products don't work, we can go find someone who will make it work. So I always tell people, when I used to work in the banking industry for the last 23 years, that a lot of times I would have to say no, because if it didn't fit into the menu or fit into the box, there was no home for it. Now the answer is yes. I can always, and pivot. We can start down this pathway, something comes up, we make a left turn. At the end of the day, you're gonna get keys in your hand, and you're gonna be able to close. Thanks to Aaron and Geoff, Jay and Roy helping with the transaction.
There you go.
And that's why we love having you on our team as we work through these loans, because we know that you can always find a way around it. And you know, it's great to have a couple of attorneys here with us as well, because I want to talk about something that's on a lot of sellers' minds recently because of where the headlines have been. And we're only going to touch on this briefly, but having attorneys here to make sure I don't say something incorrect is always something that makes me happy. So they're
not your attorney.
They're not my attorney, but they'll correct me if I'm wrong, and that's what I'm really looking for. Now, there's been a lot of conversation around commission and commission changes recently, and since this is a seminar geared towards sellers, I just want to touch on what this means, because many sellers may have read New York Times articles and might be thinking to themselves, "Oh, great, I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore." And while that is what the Times would like you to believe, it's not entirely true, and not exactly what a seller should be walking into the process thinking. Now, commissions have always been, and likely always will be, a negotiable thing in real estate. Often they're negotiated throughout the process. Now, the recent changes that the media has been publicizing has really been based off of a DOJ settlement that has yet to be approved. But the idea is that we're splitting commissions, where in the past we might talk about a 6% commission split 50-50 between agents. Now we're talking about making 2 separate offerings. So as a listing agent, if you were to work with us, we may say we're going to charge a 3% fee to list your home. And what you'd like to pay out to a buyer's agent and what we offer out to a buyer's agent, well, that's going to be up to you. And you can offer somewhere between 0 or historically what's been 3. And we'll see, I think, that as this change continues, it's likely not going to change very much, as sellers are going to still find that to incentivize good agents and good buyers, they still have to offer out buyer commissions. Anything sound wrong to the attorneys in the room?
You said nothing wrong, but it is definitely a complex discussion that requires probably the entire hour and beyond as to how it's going to affect market, mortgage rates, or not mortgage rates, but the way that Melora will be able to loan money against purchase price, if a commission is being considered as a buyer's liquidity. So many different topics come from this discussion. It's a fascinating one, which, as you mentioned, hasn't been completely fleshed out. But you didn't say anything wrong.
Good.
Good job, Geoff.
It's always good to be told that by an attorney. But like you said, Jay, there's a lot to still be determined here. But as far as for those sellers out there thinking, does this mean that things have drastically changed for me today? I don't think the answer is yes. I think that we should still be moving forward as if nothing has changed. Bigger changes that have recently come into effect, which we're about to get into, are property disclosure changes and things of that nature. But now I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because I want to talk about the selling process from start to finish. And the first part of that process is identifying your team. So in theory, if you're watching this, whether it be tonight when we're taping it or on a later date on YouTube, you may be working on that part of the process right now. Finding your team may be some of the faces you're looking at. And hopefully you're considering working with us and you'll give us a call or send us an email and we can set up an appointment to figure out what that might look like and how we can best help you forward. Once we do that, the next step is often for us to come and see whatever property we're discussing selling. And when we come to see a home, usually we're coming to look at a few different things. The first is looking to see marketability of the property. What do we think the property is going to be worth? What's around it? What are the liabilities for the sale, the unexpected things?
We want to see what you've improved on the property. So if you've done a kitchen renovation or a new bathroom, or if you got work done on the roof, we want to see what you've done to the place that like Zillow can't really show us.
We always want to be looking for what might be worth doing before we list. You know, our goal here is to help you get the highest price for your property, assuming that's your goal, which for most sellers it is. And that's also part of that initial meeting for us, is to get an understanding of what it is your goals are. Sometimes it's not about the highest price. Sometimes it's about the right buyer or the fastest buyer. Sometimes it's about the off-market buyer. There are all kinds of needs that a seller may have, and we want to make sure that we're aligning our process with your goals appropriately. But generally speaking, it's about getting the most money out of the home. So we wanted to look at the home and make sure that there aren't certain things that are worth doing. They can be small, like painting the home white on the interior to make it feel fresh, clean, and new, versus major things like we need to have appliances in the kitchen in order to close. And we've seen things from, you know, homes that had missing ceiling and missing floors to things that have been absolutely completely done over. Part of the process that we have started now is recommending a pre-listing inspection. Part of that is because, as I alluded to a little bit ago, there have been property disclosure law changes recently, where now at the point of contract, we as a seller need to make certain types of disclosures about the property's condition and history. Jay, can you talk to us a little bit about how this used to be handled and what's being done now from your perspective?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a cheat code when it came to disclosure. We were able to buy ourselves out of liability for certain things that may be affecting the property that a seller probably doesn't realize or know. But now with the changing of the rules and the law, it requires you to know. And what do I mean by that? Just up until very recently, we could pay a purchaser of a single family home $500 to get out of our responsibility to disclose a certain condition or conditions in the home that we're living in. Now, we don't have the option of buying our way out of that responsibility. And as you just alluded to, we now have to disclose to a buyer the conditions of the property, what's going on, the age of certain things, so on and so forth, without being able to duck and dodge the condition of the property. So where do I see this going? I see it going exactly the way that you described it. I think that there's now a responsibility to the buyers to have a place inspected or to know exactly what it is that you own and that you're living in, so that you can disclose things accurately, so that you don't find yourselves tied up in an argument or potentially litigation. That's something that none of us want to see as part of a transaction that's supposed to be amicable and good for all.
Absolutely. And, you know, a buyer is generally going to do their own inspection as well. But if we can identify the potential pitfalls before listing and mediate them, or at least have knowledge of them, so that our buyer isn't going to get surprised by it, it can stop us from having, you know, other speed bumps down the road that can rock a deal or even have it fall apart.
Yeah. More importantly, so we're not surprised by it during
Right.
negotiations.
I also think it may have an effect that would be significant to the two of you, especially, is if you're able to disclose the condition of a property that's very near perfect, then can't you get more money for a property that a buyer doesn't have to worry about putting money into? So you could probably charge more money for a home that's in great condition versus one that needs work. So there's that potential too.
And that's part of the process for us when we come in to see the property as part of our valuation. We want to know that we're coming into something that's in good shape, but it's always better to be able to say, not only is this property look like it's in good condition, but we've had an inspector come in and do an inspection and there was nothing that came up from that inspection. Here's a report signed by the seller attesting to that. It really can help us to negotiate and have leverage for the seller to get that best price. And that's really what we're looking for. So all of this is talking about pre-market stuff, right? We're finding our team, making sure we know what we want to be doing to prepare the home for market, doing an inspection, seeing if there's anything else. And property disclosure, again, just honing in on that, is specifically for the single and multifamilies, not co-op, condo, any other property type isn't going to be affected by that. It's only for the single and multifamily properties. Now, once we get to the point where we have identified all potential problems and fixed them, it's now pre-listing time. We're going to come in, and this is where Aaron really gets to shine.
Yeah, this is where I get to have fun. So I come in, make sure that the place is looking amazing, because we are coming in with photographers, videographers, if it's the right kind of property, if it's staged, if we stage them with furniture, or if the current furniture decor makeup is good for selling. So we come in with our photographers, our videographers, make a floor plan, and create really a story behind the sale. We create all sorts of marketing materials like postcards, videos, social media posts, email blasts, show sheets, all the things that kind of, when woven together, really create the story behind the sale of your home.
And the goal is to, I think, get as many eyeballs on your property as quickly as we can, because those first couple of weeks are absolutely essential. And, you know, New York City is a vertical market. And when we're dealing with co-ops and condos, it can take a little bit of time. And there's a patience element to it as well. Sometimes buyers need to see it and see it and see it. And after 65, 75 days on the market, suddenly there's a bidding war in the same weekend. You never know what's going to trigger it. It could just be the weather.
It's true.
I wish it wasn't. I wish I could point to, like, this is what made sometimes it's just the weather changed and buyers came out. So once we're on the market, at that point, you know, we've done our video, we've done our floor plan, we put it on the market. Aaron writes a beautiful description. That's what that journalism background is really useful for as well. And we do everything we can to get your listing to look as beautiful as possible, so it gets as much attention as possible. Usually we do our first open house as a little bit of extra time, an hour and a half, give people an opportunity, and we try to kind of funnel people in to an open house at a certain time. You know, I've been asked before, why don't we do a 2, 3, 4 hour open house? And that, for me, doesn't make sense as a marketing tactic. We want there to be a smaller window so that buyers see other buyers, hopefully, looking at your property. We want them to see somebody coming out as they're coming in. that creates a sense of demand. It creates a sense of activity. That's what we're looking for. So that's a big part of our marketing strategy as well, and timing things out and ensuring that if we coordinate it with another open house in the building and another unit, well, that gives us more opportunities to have more buyers coming through. Once we get to an accepted offer, right? We've done our showings, our open houses, and we've gotten somebody who likes it. We've negotiated back and forth, and we can go into the details some other time about how Aaron and I ensure you a smooth process before we get to an accepted offer. But once we have the accepted offer, that's when we get to bring in the big guns again and send a deal memo off to Jay. And you know, before we jump over to Jay about how he handles that process, I'm curious from the sales side, is there anything else in the title world that a seller should look at before listing and getting to this point? Because Jay's going to come in, draft a contract, and send it off and memorialize our deal. But is there anything in the title world that we need to be aware of as a seller? Or is it really something that the buyer is going to jump on?
But the answer is both. So obviously, eventually the buyer is going to be purchasing a title policy to protect the buyer. But let's rewind a little bit. When the seller purchased the property, they would have acquired title to the property. And so when we're talking speed to closing and getting through the closing, and when we're talking about what Aaron was talking about, telling the story of the property, the best thing you could do is have all of your ducks in a row. So the buyer side, just like Jay was talking about with the property disclosure report, here is the information about the property. Everything that you came here to see is actually accurate, and we're giving all the details. The best thing you can do is have that title report ready to give to the other side. Take a look at it first, show it to Jay first, so we all know what's going on with the property, and we can quickly get whatever is needed. And it gives a lot of information. And so anything that's outstanding that needs to be resolved, Jay can start working on that beforehand, because he knows that buyer side is going to be asking that. So it's really about the information, the speed, and making sure the story that you're telling is the story that buyer side is going to be receiving way early in the process.
So if a seller is getting ready to list, and maybe they've owned the home, or maybe it was their parents' home, and they have no idea who they got title from, if they even got title, which they probably did. And again, we're talking about real property here. Co-ops, you don't have title, you have liens and stock certificates, and it's a whole other conversation. But when we're talking about real property, how does somebody figure out what kind of title they have? Who do they call?
There's several possibilities. Every attorney should have given them a closing package. That should be somewhere in, if it's the case of the parents' estate, there should be a closing package there. That should include a title report. It's also searchable online if we're talking New York City, like the Bronx. It's also searchable online, or you can reach out to your friendly neighborhood title company, and we can often track down lots of information. And if you're talking outside the apartment townhouse world into actual real property, getting the old survey is very, very important for speed, because especially on the lender side, as Melora will tell you, they're going to need a new survey, an updated survey, something on the survey side. So the quicker we can get going with that, plus it saves everybody money to have an old survey. The more information you can get, the better. But a lot of that, we're really in the information business. So the earlier we can be involved, the more helpful we can be.
That's great. So that would be part of that due diligence pre-listing too, in addition to an inspection and finding out everything you can, is kind of getting a sense of your title situation, making sure you have the documents you need, as well as finding a survey, and if you can't find one, having to potentially do one, so that we don't hit that stumbling block later on. Is that right?
Correct, except the buyer would be getting a survey. If there's no survey to be found, seller doesn't have to worry about getting a new one. It's just, okay, if they have an old one, it's quicker. Save the buyer a few bucks. Plus, then they can know exactly what the contours are.
Well, good to know. So we get to a point where we have an accepted offer, and we're going to draft up a deal memo. And at that point, we send it off to Jay. Jay, we get you involved, and hopefully you're representing our seller. And there's going to be an attorney representing the buyer as well. And at that point, we kind of loop the parties together, hand off this deal memo, and give it to you. What does it look like for you from there?
Well, let me just maybe remind some of your listeners here that the tri-state area is somewhat antiquated in its approach to real estate transaction. I think that you'll find elsewhere in the country, the real estate agents are actually drafting contracts and the title companies are holding escrow and making sure that all contingency are met within a time frame that's acceptable to both sides in that contract. Lawyers are not at all involved unless there's a major problem elsewhere in the country. So some of this that I'm about to say won't necessarily apply unless you live in the tri-state area. And so once an agent or agents have a deal in place and all the business terms have been negotiated, both parties will want to make sure that their legal representation and legal protections are also in that contract. So I try to stay out of the way of the business dealings that my agents have put together and that my clients are comfortable with, and do my best to protect my clients under those restrictions the best I can, legally speaking. I want to make sure that the timing is right. I want to make sure that the buyer is obligated to do certain things and take certain steps that Melora will discuss in just a moment. And if those steps are not met, that there's a certain adequate amount of pressure, not because, again, we want to look to litigate or take anyone's deposit. Both parties want to get a deal done, theoretically. There's a transaction in place. I am there to make sure that the steps are taken and met so that we can meet at a closing table and live happily ever after, with keys being exchanged for cash. Nobody wants any problems. So for the sellers that I represent, I'm trying to put together the tightest, best possible contract that I can that will be followed time-wise and otherwise, so that both parties can get to a closing table without looking at the contract ever again.
And usually while you're working on that, we have the buyer doing their own inspection of the property. So there are a few different moving pieces happening while we try to get to the point of escrow, which is where the buyer is going to give their down payment per se, right? Not what their lending down payment is, but an escrow deposit on the contract. And that's when they sign. You don't have the seller countersign until we have that escrow deposit. Is that correct?
Yes, and this actually came up this week. I had the flip side. I had a buyer, an out-of-state buyer, who had partially executed the contract, meaning the purchaser or the buyer signs first and then waits for the seller to countersign to be in contract. And we were waiting for the wire to hit the seller's attorney's account. And he was waiting and waiting. And I called and I said, "Why haven't you sent the wire? You were supposed to send it last week." He goes, "Well, I was waiting for the seller's side to sign the contract. Why would I send a deposit to someone when they haven't countersigned the contract?" And I go, "You know what? You make a very good point. Because if the seller changed their mind, that deposit would have to be undone and wired back to the purchaser." So for whatever reason, traditionally speaking, here in New York, the buyer is simultaneously expected to sign the contract and also remit deposit that the seller's attorney will hold in escrow. Then the counter signature will happen once the seller's attorney makes mention that they have a partially executed contract in hand, and the buyer's deposit in their escrow account.
All right. So there's a lot of steps to get us there.
All right.
I mean,
Or not. Maybe that was just a mouthful because I tend to just talk
no,
too much.
Great. Here we are. We've talked about quite a bit to get ourselves just to a signed contract. I mean, so now we have a contract signed. We take that and we're going to send it off to Melora, who's going to be, assuming that Melora is the one handling the buyer's loan. And we're going to, what else is going to start happening as we kind of now have hit that signed contract? Aaron and I do the fun thing. We change the status from listed to in contract. And then I just kind of sit back depending on the property type and wait.
We don't sit back. We manage the process.
Oh, right. So we're going to make sure that everybody else is doing what they got to do, which involves calling Melora, making sure she's got the loan process moving, calling Jay, making sure that your team is talking to the buyer's attorney's team and keeping the pressure on to ensure that they're doing what they have to do.
At this point, we're just annoying.
Yeah.
And that's on your behalf.
So is there anything other than us being annoying that you think is worth mentioning? I mean, Melora, you have some process happening on your end.
Yeah, so once Jay gets the contract button, once you help them find the property, once Roy has said title is clear, meaning ownership, there's no liens, nobody can come after your property once you own it. Once Roy's done all that due diligence, you've done your inspection, and Jay gets that contract buttoned up and tight as a whistle, then the buyer begins to, and the seller, because the seller needs a place to live. So the seller and the buyer are starting to shop for homes. And if the buyer or the seller is using me for their financing, but let's in this case say the buyer, because now we're in contract, this is where all the due diligence starts on the buyer. If they didn't get pre-approved in advance, can they get a mortgage? Number one. So we start down the pathway of gathering all their financial documentation if that did not happen in pre-approval. But on top of that, we start the due diligence on the property. So at that time, we start the appraisal process. So whether it's a single family home, co-op, or condo, we order an appraisal. This is an appraiser is an independent contractor. They do not work for the bank that you are working with. And they basically are going to go to the property and say, let the bank know that the property is worth what you're buying it for. So they're going to do that by finding about 4 to 5 comparable sales, what's sold in the neighborhood within a mile radius hopefully within the last 4 to 6 months, a like property. And then what's the market, what are listings going for? Appraised value is on closed sales, but listings give an indication, is the neighborhood holding value? Is it increasing in value? It shows the direction of what the neighborhood's going into. So we wait on that report to say that property is worth what you're buying it for or not. And so we start 2 roads simultaneously. We start the property road, which is the appraisal, the title report, everything that's outside of your control. Then we start the approval process for you from financing standpoint, which is basically everything within your control. Where do you work, your pay stubs, your bank statements, if you're getting a gift, who's going to give you the gift? It needs to be a family member. So we start going down all that paths. So eventually 2 separate roads come together and converge. At that point, I'm able to deliver to Jay and to you all what's known as a non-contingent mortgage commitment letter. So meaning that everything outside of your control has been satisfied. The home came in at value, title is clear. If you're buying a co-op or condo, the buildings are on the bank's approved list. All of those issues have been cleared. And then once we deliver that commitment letter, all that's left to do is for you to really keep your job. Please do not quit your job, because the very last thing we do before we wire money to the bank's attorney is we call to verify that you're still employed. So do not pull a fast one and decide that you no longer want to work because you've got a new home and you're going to paint walls instead. Keep your job until the keys are in your hand.
What else should people not do while they're getting a mortgage?
Well, you can change jobs as long as it's in the same field, but just make sure you let your banker know. Because again, the last thing we do is call to verify. And I've had it happen to me several times where we've called to verify and the person is no longer working for that company. And it does make my heart skip a beat until I call you and say, oh, well, I worked at Google and now I'm working at Microsoft or whatever it is, same fields, technology. And I say, okay, no problem. We need your offer letter, but it can cause a delay because now we have to re-verify your salary, verify your income. So I would say whatever changes you're going to do during the mortgage process, let your loan originator know up front. And I want to give you some advice as well. Because of federal laws, you moving your money around a lot actually also causes a lot of delays. So when you apply for a mortgage, do your very best to keep your profile pretty much the same. We understand you have to live and pay bills, but keep it the same, because if you're moving your money around from savings to checking and we have to update bank statements, we're going to say what happened to your money. And then you're going to have to say, oh, I moved it from here to here to here. We're going to have to verify that. We're going to have to verify the paper trail. We're following federal law. We're not trying to be nosy. We just need to make sure we're following law. So keep your money where it is. Keep your job. If you change jobs, let us know immediately. Do not, if you can help it, add any new debt. I know you want to buy a new couch, I know you want to decorate. I get it. Trust me, I've been there many times. But if we have to rerun credit during the process and we see that you've taken new debt out, it could affect your ability to remain approved. You're going to have to write letters of explanation as to why you took out new debt.
Right. No new cars, no new credit cards. Absolutely.
Keep once you know that you're going to buy, live a very within the box life.
When you're checking out at Target or Kohl's, and the cashier says, "Would you like to save 15% on your purchase today?" And you say, "Well, how do I do that?" And they go, "Well, would you like to apply for the Kohl's credit card or the Target credit card? Just sign a couple of documents. You'll save it on this, and then you can just close the credit card as soon as you're done with your purchase." And it sounds appealing, but be mindful, folks. That is not going to look good to the bank that you're trying to borrow enough money to buy that home or that apartment. So please.
Yeah, Jay, perfect. That's a perfect example. Or you are going to be leaving Manhattan and you're going to be relocating to the Bronx or to Westchester where Geoff and them sell, and you want to buy a new car. Please buy your home first. The minute you have your keys, you can go directly to the car dealership. But just during the process, please keep everything how you started it. And if you do make a change, the very first call you make, preferably before you make the change, is to your loan originator.
So while you're working on getting all of that financial stuff figured out, we're doing appraisals, we're doing, income verification, etc. If we're dealing with a co-op, we're doing a board application, getting them ready, figuring out the paperwork, getting all the backup statements, etc., making it look as clear, concise, and perfect as we can so management can really digest it quickly, pass it on to that board, and get that interview scheduled. The interview is usually a relatively quick process, and from there, on a co-op, once we have the okay from the board, it's just about scheduling that closing. Now, I went through that pretty quick because I want to shift gears back to real property, because the other aspect that we're dealing with waiting to close when it's not financing is title. So coming back to you, Roy, if we've done our due diligence and we've got our title figured out on the front end of the process, then hopefully it's a really smooth sailing sort of thing. But the buyer for our property's got to get title as well. So what does it look like as we're trying to get ourselves ready to close? Melora's done all she needs to get us ready to close as far as the buyer's loan goes. What are we doing if you're representing the buyer on a new title policy?
Exactly. And exactly what Melora was saying before. No surprises is a good thing. The more that we know what's happening with the transaction, and the more everybody would have disclosed to their brokers, to their attorney and their lender, then we can get all the publicly available information, so we now can give the buyer a clean title policy. If anything comes up that no one knew about, if the seller turns out it's an estate but no one told anybody, if there's a mortgage that they didn't tell anybody, if there's a lot of things that are now outstanding which is completely out of the buyer's control, we're not going to be able to issue a title as quickly as everybody wants. And the last thing we want as a title company, we don't want the delay to be us. We want it to be the building. We want it to be the lender with its underwriting and all the other rules that everybody has to follow. We want to be able to say we have everything we need. So if the seller has all their ducks in a row, then it's just a matter of what does the lender need in order for us to give the lender a policy, which that could be a whole other hour discussion, but we have to make sure the lender gives us, it'll usually be in the commitment letter, what the lender needs, and to make sure that the property is what the broker said it was, what the attorneys negotiated it was. So what they are buying, they have legal title to what they're buying. And because everyone's going to want a smooth, quick closing ASAP if their lines are about to be hit and if people have to move. So the more information we have at the get-go, from all the parties involved, and then we get to corral buyer and seller and buyer's lender and seller's lender. And since New York is the Full Attorney Employment Act, the lender's attorney will be at the closing and the buyer and seller attorney would be at the closing, and maybe the title attorney has to be on speed dial to clear any particular issues. But we really want all the information chain. And what I always tell people, make sure you CC me or whoever your direct representative is, because you don't want you guys to have to track down. You guys have already enough to track down, rely on your title company, who's really in touch with everybody on the transaction, buyer, seller. And especially, as Jay can tell you, when these things get contentious, people are not going to want to return his calls because, they're mad at him, even though they're supposed to. Well, our calls, they have to return because they're the ones who want us to get to the closing table. So keep your title company informed on speed dial, on email dial, and it's our job to make it as smooth as possible.
I mean, it's so important that the title be clear and get done in a timely manner so that we can keep to the contractual obligations that Jay had put together and that we hopefully negotiated for our seller as well. I think that a lot of sellers are going to have concern, and this might be good for kind of both you, Roy, and Jay to talk a little bit about, in that once we're closed, how do I know that there's nothing that's going to follow me? So what does the closing day look like as far as once they hand off those keys as a seller, where does the end of that liability hit? I know part of that process for us, at least on the broker side, is we're going to do a final walkthrough the day of the closing or the day before with that buyer and make sure that there's nothing that's surprising at that final walkthrough. I think we usually say it should be in the same condition the home was in when they signed the contract, with maybe some minor wear and tear. But what does that look like for you two?
Are you asking me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's very few things that we describe as surviving closing. There's exceptions to that, of course. We could get into just a few of those. There's some tax exceptions. There's also, in the event that there needs to be an escrow created for the seller to complete certain things that were promised to the buyer, but the buyer is in a rush to close for a variety of reasons, one being maybe a rate lock that's about to expire or other pressures in their life, and the seller and buyer can agree to close at a certain time, but it's not convenient for the seller necessarily. There'll be escrows for post-closing occupancy. There may also be, especially in the city where there's potentially open permits that the seller didn't know about that will take time to clear, which is much longer than the gestation period of a contract to a closing, and there's needing more time. The seller will be on the hook for those permits to be closed out, but why should that prevent the buyer from enjoying the home and closing on the property that they want to live in? So there's a few examples right there where a seller will remain on the hook. But if we all do our job properly, there should be very, very little, if anything at all, that the seller will have to think about once they've received their cash for the keys.
What about on your side, Roy? Is there anything that might be a concern that would go beyond the closing table? Or is there anything that you would want to know a seller is doing as preparation? Or at that point, is it just kind of like, we're set?
Theoretically, we are set. Theoretically, if everybody has done what they're supposed to, we are set. So once the transaction closes, the buyer's policy will kick in. So anything that wasn't done correctly, the title company says, we have collected the documents that we need. We logistically, here in New York, we conduct the closing from beginning to end. So we're saying the deed is right, the mortgage is right, your title is clear, you're good to go on the buyer side. If any issue comes up, we'll take care of it. Now, there are a few cases where seller's not off the hook. So for example, what we'll often do is have affidavits signed by seller side or whoever's representing seller, attesting to certain things. And if anything is not true and what they told us was true, outstanding mortgages, certain problems they knew about, then buyer is still happy in their home. Then we have to go after the seller and say, how come you told us there was no mortgage? We just found a mortgage, that was filed yesterday for $100,000. You didn't tell us, kind of a thing, because you signed off of that on closing. The only other time that the buyer side title would be involved, if the seller, when they purchased, did not use a national underwriter, so didn't follow national underwriting rules, then problems could arise, because then we are in a position of having clean paper for the buyer, but now the things that seller did to close were not done correctly, and we may not know that at closing. And so in that case, the seller would be reached out to, but that would only be if they didn't use a national underwriter. So what I always tell everybody, make sure, not at the agency level, make sure it's a national underwriter, First American, Old Republic, Stewart, one of those national companies that's really bonded and taken care of. because then even if there's a mistake made by the attorneys, even a mistake by the lender, even by the local title agency, that national paper, will carry through. But theoretically, if everyone does what they were supposed to do, everything is on the title company. That's why you get a title company, because they offer that protection, sellers off the hook.
So, I mean, it sounds like, and I like the very attorney answer, right? Theoretically, it should all be fine. There's never a guarantee, but it seems pretty few and far between that something would be amiss post-close. And I think, Jay, as part of that closing process, we kind of prorate up to the date of what expenses were. So if your monthly taxes are X, we're going to make it prorated for the amount of time that you were in the home for close. Now, I know a lot of sellers who are buying are very concerned about the timing of how, if I need the money from my sale in order to make my purchase, how do I make this work out where I can move that money over and not have a problem? Is there any kind of thought that you would give to a seller who's trying to figure out how to navigate that? That's to you, Jay or Melora.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that I speak of when I'm initially sort of becoming engaged in the process. This is a very early point in the conversation where I say, are you moving from a rental? If I'm representing a seller, where is it that you're going? How long do you have? Because it's very difficult and there is no science to knowing exactly when a buyer is going to be ready to buy and when you're potentially going to be able to purchase from whoever it is that is selling to you. And it's a chain of events that's really out of everyone's control. So one of the first things I ask is there temporary housing that you would feel comfortable in as part of this process, should you have to go somewhere temporarily? And this is critical. As my lovely family is eating dinner, I'm going to walk into the other room so we don't get any background noise, but you can still hear what I'm having to say. And that is essentially, you need to prepare yourself for worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is you're under pressure with your contract to sell. You have to close, but your sellers that you're buying from are not yet ready. So where are you going to stay? Now, the opposite could be true too, right? You're trying to close on your place. Your sellers are ready for you to close. And you keep telling them, well, what do? I've got to stall because I haven't closed on my property. And that's where I come and become involved to pressure that buyer to move things along as quickly as possible, because we're in a desperate situation where we need to close. What can I do to help to make things go faster? And hopefully everyone can cooperate and can be on the same page so that you don't have too many complications or problems. But these are things to think about, and there is no perfect science. So just be prepared for that.
I want to kick that over to Melora, because I think that there may be something on your end that's worth talking about as far as making that timing work. And
with your over 100 different products.
So can you talk to us a little bit about maybe how a bridge loan product might be an option? Because I think a lot of people don't know that that's out there and how that might work.
Well, there are bridge loans. It's on real property. So meaning it's property that you actually own, have a deed to, not like a co-op where you own shares in a corporation. So the property type is a condo or a single multifamily home. Residential real estate, everyone, is 1 to 4 families. So as long as it's a 1 to 4 family or a condominium, there's something called a bridge loan. And we basically bridge the gap between your selling and your buying. There's a product usually goes up to about $300,000. It's a fixed interest rate. Right now it's about 9.99%. We give you this money. We also want to do the loan for your purchase because we want to make sure that gap is bridged, that we get paid off this temporary loan that we're going to give you. But there are loans out there to help bridge the gap. There's other ways financially you could do it. Some people have home equity lines of credits and they borrow the money off the lines of credit. Some people have hefty investment accounts. They take what's known as margin loans. Some people borrow against their 401k if they have enough money in the 401k to borrow against. So there's other financial strategies that you could talk to your financial planner around. But from a housing standpoint, there are bridge loans, and there are some bridge loans that can go up above $300,000 that don't have time limits. We like to see a bridge loan closed within about 120 days, so 4 months. It is meant to be short-term financing. It's not meant to be drawn out. So the strategies are out there if you're trying to bridge the gap between buying and selling. Jay has a lot of fascinating things that he can do as far as things known as rent back. If you can't get out, you can go ahead and sell, get your money so you can move on with your life. But rent back the apartment that you used to own from the new buyers. There's so many things we can do, and that's why your team is so important. People who've been in the industry for a long time know all the ways to problem solve and find solutions.
You knew exactly where I was going to go. It's all about having the right people in your corner as you go through this process, because most likely if you're a seller and you're selling residential real estate, unless you do this every day, and most likely you're not watching this, if you do, you're making you're dealing with a process that's going to be handling one of your biggest assets, one of your, probably more of your money than is anywhere else, and you want to make sure that you have the right people working with you who know how to do it in today's market, who are adaptable, who are kind, and who are going to know what they're talking about. This has been a really wonderful panel, and I think we talked about a lot of really great stuff. I want to go around one more time and let you guys kind of say who you are, what you do, and if you want to give them where they can find you. But we'll start with you, Melora Love.
Also, if you could say where you are able to work, like if you can lend in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or if you could do title in where, just let us know where people can use your services.
So again, my name is Melora Love, and I'm a senior loan originator with Cross Country Mortgage, and I'm licensed to do loans. We are able to do loans. The reason why it's called Cross Country, because we can do loans across the country, and I can help you with that. And I'm based in New York City, but again, I'm based right up on the Upper West Side, getting close up to your neighborhood up there, Aaron and Geoff. And but again, I am able to do loans everywhere, and do loans everywhere. It's a lot of fun. So I know that the nuances for the majority of every state in the United States.
Awesome. Roy?
Again, Roy Fenichel, Newmark title. Like Melora, we are nationwide. We're residential, also commercial. Any kind of property, from land to buildings to residential. And sometimes it's, hey, can you give me information about a property somewhere? And we're happy to do that, or make introductions across the country. That's always a lot of fun. But I'm sort of like the umpire in baseball. The whole idea is not to have a problem be with me. It's for us to smoothly get everyone what they need, where they need, and through the closing as soon as possible. Thanks.
I was waiting for a baseball reference.
Thanks for inviting me.
But you didn't say your team. I'm shocked that the Mets didn't come out.
Hopefully I hit out of the park.
We're going to win the transaction, so we're skipping the Mets, right?
Now we know we're in the
It's
Bronx.
the Razorbacks that are going to win, right, Jay?
The Bronx.
Yes,
team, so we're going to go back to the Yankees.
my Diamondbacks are off to a slightly
Diamondbacks,
slower.
excuse me.
It's okay. They're off to a slightly slower start than we anticipated with all of the nice off-season moves. But I'm going to blame health and wellness, but that's for another panel. Melora, your Yankees just took a 3-1 lead in the bottom of the first on a Verdugo home run, so you'll be happy to know that.
Thank you for letting me know.
Putting aside our baseball love, I'm Jay Zimner. I'm the managing member of Zimner Law PC since 2003. We focus on residential real estate, so you don't have to. That's someone else's tagline, I think.
Yeah, but it's a good one.
It is a good one. I like to help my clients make this as seamless as possible. It can be a very stressful time in many people's lives. It's usually dealing with the biggest investment that someone has made or is about to make. It's also someone's shelter, and it's a whole lot of so many other things that are going on with an individual or a couple or a family, where they're living, who their neighbors are, what their expectations are, how long they're going to live there, what the rules and regulations are regarding their lifestyle, and just making sure that all of that matches up to the best of my ability so that my clients can feel happy with the team that Geoff and Aaron have assembled. And hopefully I'm lucky enough to help those people, because Geoff and Aaron make my life so much easier when it comes to those things that I'm concerning myself with my clients. So Zimner Law PC, I'm licensed in Connecticut and in New York. My firm is located on Madison Avenue between 49th and 50th. I have a team of people who are excellent as well, who save my life on a day-to-day basis by making sure that my deals get done smoothly and efficiently. Zimner Law PC.
Awesome. I'm Aaron.
I'm Geoff.
And we are the Aaron and Geoff team at Compass, your Bronx residential real estate experts.
We also cover Lower Westchester and Upper Manhattan.
We
So
sure
if
do.
you need any help nationwide, we do a lot of networking and ensure that we have partners throughout the country who can help you. So whether you're looking to purchase or sell in New York City or beyond, give us a call. We'd love to help you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you next time.